2258, an act to provide anti-retaliation protections for antitrust whistleblowers.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse, and the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Armstrong, will each control 20 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Today I rise in strong support of the Criminal Antitrust Anti-Retaliation Act legislation that I introduced with Chairman Nadler, Chairman CICILLINE, and Ranking Member Sensenbrenner that would extend whistleblower protections to private sector employees who report criminal antitrust violations to the federal government. Just by way of background, the Criminal Antitrust Anti-Retaliation Act is based on recommendations from a 2011 Government Accountability Office report. The legislation will protect private sector employees for simply doing the right thing and ensure that those who retaliate against whistleblowers are held accountable. Under the legislation, an employee who believes that he or she is victim of retaliation can file a complaint with the Secretary of Labor and allows for that employee to be reinstated to their former position if the Secretary finds in his or her favor. Mr. Speaker, antitrust violations often result in higher prices, less innovation, and fundamentally less choice. Private sector employees are integral in maintaining the integrity of our antitrust laws, without whom violations such as price and wage fixing would go unreported. Since our nation's founding, our country has had a rich tradition of working to protect whistleblowers. Today, more than ever, honoring that history is tremendously important. No employee should fear for their job or face retaliation for exposing illegal anti-competitive behavior such as price fixing. With that, Mr. Speaker, I want to again thank Chairman Nadler, Chairman CICILLINE, and the Majority Leader for bringing this bill to the House floor. I also want to thank Senator Grassley and Senator Leahy for spearheading this effort in the Senate and for working so persistently to get it passed in that chamber. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from North Dakota is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 2258, the Criminal Antitrust Anti-Retaliation Act, like its House companion, H.R. 8226, protects whistleblowers who help the federal government investigate and prosecute criminal violations of antitrust laws. When workers give information to law enforcement, cooperate with criminal investigations, or testify about an employer's crimes, their employer may retaliate. Retaliation can take many forms, such as firing, demotion, suspension, or other types of retaliatory discrimination. Whatever its form, retaliation is wrong. Workers should not be punished when they help the authorities address criminal antitrust violations, violations that ultimately harm American consumers. And if this retaliation goes unaddressed, it can have damaging long-term effects. For one thing, unaddressed retaliation can suppress future whistleblowers who might otherwise step forward to shine a light on any wrongdoing. When whistleblowers are scared to speak out, law enforcement may never learn of the criminal antitrust violations in the first place. Likewise, without the help from whistleblowers during investigations, law enforcement agencies may be unable to successfully prosecute wrongdoers. Senate Bill 2258 addresses these policy concerns by prohibiting retaliatory discrimination against whistleblowers who speak out against criminal antitrust violations. This bill also gives whistleblowers recourse if their employers do choose to retaliate. Under the bill, a whistleblower can file a complaint through a process the Department of Labor oversees and, in limited circumstances, seek relief by suing in federal court. While establishing whistleblower protections, Senate Bill 2258 also puts important guardrails in place to ensure that bad actors do not abuse this law. The bill denies whistleblower protections to people who investigate the violation of criminal antitrust laws or obstruct an investigation. Instead, the bill will protect workers who are acting in good faith. Finally, I should note that our colleague, Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, a co-sponsor of the House companion bill, has worked throughout his career to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. He's described the general policy animating this bill and highlighted the importance of whistleblowers when he said that whistleblowers help maintain the integrity of our laws. Mr. Sensenbrenner is correct. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How much time do I have remaining?
Gentleman has 18 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Rhode Island and the vice chair, or excuse me, the chairman of the Antitrust Subcommittee, Mr. CICILLINE.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of the Criminal Antitrust Anti-Retaliation Act, which was introduced in the House by Congressman Neguse, that's H. 8226, and a piece of legislation that he relentlessly championed and finally is before us for final passage. This important legislation protects whistleblowers who report criminal misconduct under the antitrust laws. And as my good friend just mentioned, I'd also like to acknowledge the leadership of Jim Sensenbrenner, who will be retiring from Congress, but who has made protection of whistleblowers an important part of his work here, and we will miss him on the Antitrust Subcommittee. This important bill provides employees with a mechanism for reporting retaliation to the Department of Labor. Whistleblowers who report on criminal antitrust conduct and are retaliated against, such as through wrongful discharge, demotion, or harassment, will have a path for reinstatement, be able to be compensated for harms that they suffer, and reimbursed for litigation expenses for meritorious claims. By extending these protections to employees who report criminal violations of antitrust laws to the federal government, this important measure will encourage whistleblowers to come forward to report extreme criminal violations of the antitrust laws, such as price and wage fixing, which are the supreme evil of antitrust. Moreover, the legislation brings the criminal antitrust laws in line with other important laws, such as the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which protects whistleblowers who report corporate wrongdoing. No worker in America should fear for their job or economic livelihood for exposing corporations that engage in criminal activity, and exposing this misconduct is critical for antitrust enforcement purposes. I really want to end where I began by applauding Congressman Neguse, the Vice Chair of the House Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee, a really valued and deeply respected member of the subcommittee, for his extraordinary leadership on this vital legislation, which has already been passed unanimously by the Senate. I urge all of my colleagues to support this common-sense legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of time. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I again want to thank the chairman of the Antitrust Subcommittee, Mr. CICILLINE, for his leadership, his thoughtfulness, and for making consumer protection the central focus of his work and the Antitrust Subcommittee's work over this past Congress. With that, we are prepared to close if my colleague from North Dakota...
Yield back the balance of time. The gentleman is recognized. Has yielded.
You yield. With that, I would again just say thank you to Mr. Armstrong, my colleague on the other side of the aisle. I would lend my voice as well to those who have rightfully praised the work of Mr. Sensenbrenner, who, for many, many years in the United States Congress has served with distinction representing the people of Wisconsin. And I know that this bill was certainly important to him, and we appreciate his efforts on that front. Finally, I would just close with this. It can be lost, rather, on the American public as we talk about things like price fixing and the antitrust laws that are currently on the books, how that connects to the everyday life of Americans. Fundamentally, this bill is about consumer protection. It's about protecting the public. Before I came to Congress, I served several years in the cabinet of then-Governor John Hickenlooper, leading our state's consumer protection agency, the Department of Regulatory Agencies, a 600-person department with a $100 million budget, civil servants from across our state working hard each and every day to protect the consuming public and the people of the state of Colorado. The same work that folks do at the FTC and the Department of Justice and the Antitrust Division each and every day. This is another tool that can be used in the toolbox of regulators here in Washington as we work to make consumer protection a priority and ultimately partner with those in the private sector who wish to report abusive and anti-competitive conduct that might be happening in the broader marketplace. So again, I am thankful to the sponsors of this bill in the Senate, to the leadership in the House for bringing this bill forward to the floor, and I would urge a yes vote on the legislation before the House. And with that, I would yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back the balance of time. The question is, members, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 2258? Those in favor